I'd like to welcome you to GMO Free DC's presentation of new evidence of serious harm of genetically modified food. Please join me in a warm welcome for our speakers this evening. We have Sally Fallon Morell, best-selling author and president of the Weston A. Price Foundation, and Jeffrey Smith, best-selling author, producer, and director of the award-winning Genetic Roulette. And also this evening, we have translating for the deaf community, Mara Kammerer. Please, Sally Fallon Morell.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for having me. Thank you all for coming to a discussion of a very serious topic. I am actually not an expert on this topic, and for that reason I'm not going to speak very long. I think we all really want to hear what Jeffrey has to say. But I will just talk a little bit about GMOs from the perspective of the Weston A. Price Foundation and what we are seeing and hearing today about health issues out there. GMO, of course, as you know, stands for Genetically Modified Organism. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, Jeffrey, but I believe the reason that we have these things is because of a Supreme Court decision. Was it 1976? It was the Supreme Court that said that you could patent life forms. It was the Supreme Court decision, and that opened the doors to this frankenfood that we have today. Probably you all know this, but the way that genetic modification is done is they have a way of inserting foreign proteins into the genetic material of a seed. And it's not just these foreign proteins that are inserted, but they also have what they call vectors. And I don't understand this particularly well, but the main vector they use is E. coli. Now, E. coli is a ubiquitous bacteria that's found in human and all animal waste products and is actually benign. The vast majority of strains of E. coli are benign, and it is actually important for us to be exposed to E. coli. But from our perspective, one of the most serious consequences of GMO foods is that these E. coli vectors in this genetic material, in all these seeds, being fed to animals in filthy, crowded conditions, is a perfect breeding ground for mutated E. coli. And lo and behold, one of the things that we have seen since the introduction of these genetically modified organisms is all of these new extremely virulent forms of E. coli that really can make you sick, that cause a reaction from the kidneys. It's called HUS. Don't know exactly what that stands for, but it's where the kidneys kind of have to go into overdrive, and you are killed by the products of the overworking kidneys. So one very serious consequence of genetically modified organisms is food safety, because we have genetic material in the wrong place, genetic material that divides and mutates easily, and is bringing us all of these very virulent forms of a microorganism that's otherwise benign. And of course we have, this affects the whole food supply. It affects vegetables grown that are watered by water coming out of confinement animal operations. It definitely affects the meat that we're eating. So that's one of our big concerns, is food safety. But a second concern has to do with what happens when someone eats genetically modified food, what happens in their guts, in their digestive tracts. And you've got two things going on here, as I understand it. Maybe Jeffrey can add or correct me, add to what I'm saying or correct me with what I'm saying. First of all, you've got foreign proteins. You have, for example, the snowdrop, protein from the snowdrop plant, which is toxic. It's a toxic protein. So you have these seeds that make toxic foreign proteins whose effects we have no idea what these effects are. And secondly, you have these E. coli now in the gut, now mutating. This genetic material can be passed to other bacteria in your gut. That's something very serious. And the one thing that we hear about at the Weston A. Price Foundation over and over again is digestive issues, especially in our children. Serious overgrowth of very toxic gut flora, very leaky guts, inability to digest a lot of foods, food allergies that are mysterious and that can't be pinpointed. And I really do think that the genetically modified seeds, the genetically modified food is playing a big factor in this epidemic. It's really making life miserable for hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of growing children at a time when their lives should be happy and healthy. Jeffrey will talk more about these side effects. The question is, what do we do about this? I'm in the process of reading a very depressing book called Foodopoly, which talks about the huge power of companies like Monsanto, the concentration in the animal production industry. For example, almost all the pork that's sold in this country is produced by about 3 companies, vertically integrated companies. All of these animals are in confinement, and all of the feed that's given to these animals is genetically modified. And we can all, certainly we should be working for labeling. I think this is something that's very doable, and it's bound to come. I'm very skeptical, I'm very pessimistic about influencing Congress, influencing agencies, USDA, FDA, EPA, all of these agencies that should be protecting us. They have pretty much been bought, and I'm very pessimistic about their influencing them. But that doesn't mean there's things we can't do. And the first thing is that this is something we can all do, and if enough of us do it, it will bring down this monster. And that is, don't eat the witch's food. Don't eat the witch's food. That means we have to be very conscious of what we eat. That means we need to avoid the, obviously genetically modified foods. I believe that's canola, corn, soy, and sugar beets, and papaya, squash, I think. It's not organic, so organic food is supposedly not genetically modified, but so much of our organic food is coming from overseas these days, it's hard to know. Certainly avoid the toxic vegetable oils. They're almost always soy or canola. That means you have to eat butter, cook in lard, cook in tallow, use coconut oil. So all of the healthy fats and oils that we promote at the Weston A. Price Foundation, that's really key. The Weston A. Price Foundation has chapters all over the world. We have almost 600 local chapters, and there's certainly a chapter close to you. And if you call your local chapter, that local chapter keeps a list of food sources with a particular emphasis on raw milk from grass-fed cows and meat that is pasture-raised, meat, chicken, pork, beef, and so forth. And that's something that we can all do. We can make an effort to support local farmers who are doing things without GMOs, to eat food that's not genetically engineered, and to just each of us make a personal choice not to do this. I think we all need to work very hard for labeling of genetically engineered food. And finally, let me just say this. I was talking to Betsy about this. We have this incredibly industrialized food system, of which the genetically modified seeds is one very large part of that. It will not go on forever. Something is going to collapse. We will either have some kind of dust bowl. We will have a wipeout in these confinement facilities. You know, the genetics are so limited in these confinement facilities. I've had vets tell me this. They think this is the biggest threat to our food supply. One opportunistic infection that these limited genetics are vulnerable to could wipe out, whole factories of animals. Just give you one example. There was a bird flu outbreak in the Virginia confinement chicken houses a few years ago, and they had to truck out 1,000 tractor trailer loads of dead birds. And they blamed it on Joel Salatin's outdoor chickens. They said that the red-winged blackbirds picked up a virus from his chickens and took it to the chicken houses, and the birds got sick. So a few years ago in the Shenandoah Valley, there's a big confinement chicken operation. Many farmers doing this. And they had an outbreak of bird flu in these confinement chicken houses, and they had to truck out 1,000 tractor trailer loads of dead chickens. And they blamed it on Joel Salatin's pasture-raised chicken operation, which was in the same area. So. No, he had no chickens that were sick. Yeah. And the vets privately said, you have too many birds in too small a space in these chicken houses. And who knows whether the feed, the genetically modified feed, was a factor. It probably was a big factor. So I think this system is eventually going to collapse. I think I'm quite concerned about this. And I think the most important thing is to just make sure that we're developing alternatives, trying to create a robust pasture-based system of local farms that we buy directly from, so there'll be enough food when something like this happens, because I think we have a very serious situation. Another thing I often talk about is the natural selection of the wise. This is nature's way, and people who continue to eat industrial food, who continue to eat genetically modified food, it doesn't happen overnight, but they become sicker and sicker. You get more and more infertility, which is what we're seeing out there. And this is nature's way of getting rid of what doesn't fit in with nature's plan. And meanwhile, we have thousands of people, members of the Weston A. Price Foundation, very concerned parents who are thinking about their food and who are raising their children on good food. And they will be the ones who survive. And I call that the natural selection of the wise. So all of you here tonight are very wise people. I'm sure you're all very careful about the food you eat. And I think we really now want to hear from Jeffrey, because he is the one who knows the most about what's happening in this field, who can help us organize and get us off and running. So thank you.
Good evening. Nice to see you all here. I was born in Washington, D.C., so this is like coming home, sort of. I didn't spend a lot of time. How many people here are farmers? Raise your hand. Let's hear it for the farmers. I was giving a talk at Friends of the Earth today, and there was someone who was involved in endangered species. Well, the farmers are an endangered species in the United States. How many people are gardeners? Ah, nearly everyone. How many people eat? Almost as many farmers and gardeners. Okay. I want to talk to you about the dangers of genetically engineered foods and some of the new information that's come out recently. And in fact, we're going to have information that's so new it's going to come out this evening. How many of you are conscientiously avoiding genetically engineered foods? Raise your hand. Okay, look around. Now, how many of you noticed, keep your hands up, how many of you noticed, and if you have, keep your hands up, an improvement in your health when you switched to a non-GMO diet? Put your hands down if you did not notice an improvement in your health. Okay? So I would say most of the people that's changed their diet had some type of improvement in health. Now, what type of symptoms did you see go away or were alleviated? Skin rash. Okay, skin rash all over the body. Did anyone else notice that a skin rash or skin condition went away or was alleviated switching to non-GMO? We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 people. Thank you. Plus you. 7 people here noticed a reduction or an elimination of a skin condition switching to a non-GMO diet. How many days did it take you? Within 3 days. Amazing. 3 days. Anyone else? How many days did it take you? Gradual process for you. Anyone happen quickly? Medium? Medium? Okay. We see this all over. I'm asking audiences all over the country where I travel this very same question. And skin conditions come up about 70 to 80% of the time. There's at least someone that has a skin condition that goes away or is improved. People talk about ulcered skin, complete cracks, horrible skin conditions. I talked to one person who was 25 days into a non-GMO diet, and her skin condition, it was a serious issue, was at a doctor's office, had significantly improved. I talked to a 13-year-old activist in Toronto who's getting all sorts of press on being an anti-GMO activist, Rachel Parent, and she said her skin condition and acne improved when she switched to a complete non-GMO diet. All right? What are other symptoms? Yes? Interesting. No more need for deodorant now. Okay, so how do you say destinkified? Interesting, very interesting. So anyone else have a similar? Okay, one other. That's new. That's new in my experience. And now we have 2 interesting supporters where the odor disappeared. Okay. Anything else? Anyone else? Yeah. Mental clarity. What did you just say? Mental clarity. I have heard that in almost every single talk where I ask this question. How many others have noticed an improvement in mental clarity switching to non? Keep your hands up. I'm going to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. 20 people noticed increased clarity in their minds when they switched to non-GMO. For those of you who haven't switched from non-GMO, you might be starting to think maybe it's worth it to give it a shot. Okay, and another symptom. Another symptom? Yes. Better digestion. Who noticed better digestion? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Only 9. Man, it wasn't the winner. Usually digestion is the big winner. Okay, digestion is very, very common experience in people that eliminate GMOs, their digestive tract improves. That same person that had the skin condition clear up in 25 days, her Crohn's disease disappeared in 3 days. She had Crohn's for 30 years. Someone else in the same doctor's office prescribed a non-GMO diet, had irritable bowel, disappeared in about 3 weeks. Another person, it took 6 weeks. There was in the same doctor's office, there was a 9-year-old, wrenching gut pain, horrible, debilitating, like glass in the intestines, completely disappeared. Another symptom? Yes. Inflammation and joint pain. Okay, how many? Raise your hand for inflammation. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I won't count you because you're not really raising your hand. Okay, 6 or 7, I think. Inflammation and joint pain. So that's also common. Inflammation in general, joint pain in particular, because inflammation is the basis of a lot of different diseases, and so inflamed joints is one. But you can, some of the gastrointestinal disorders are inflammation. Some of the skin conditions, inflammation. So that's a catch-all phrase, and it works in both cases. All right? And we'll talk about inflammation. We'll talk about all these more specifically. And why would GMOs be causing these things? Anything else? Yes. I was waiting for that. It's like, where's my allergy person? How many people notice a reduction in allergies? Raise your hand. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Almost every talk, except maybe one, there's someone that said their allergies disappeared. In fact, I was talking to someone today from China. He said when he came from China, it was like 10 years were fine, and then the last between 10 and 15 years, people would start getting allergies. Nowadays, people come from China and they get allergies much more quickly. And I'm thinking that makes sense in terms of GMOs. So I want to take a moment and just dive into allergies as one example of the link between GMOs and a particular disorder, and then we'll come back to the symptoms. Why would GMOs cause allergic reactions? Well, there's about a dozen reasons that we can think of, but let's just take the top ones. When you take a gene and insert it into the DNA, it produces a protein, and the proteins are what causes allergic reactions, typically. Now, the protein that's produced in certain corn plants is called Bt toxin. How many people have heard of Bt toxin? All right? So, how many people have used Bt spray in your farm or garden? Raise your hand. Okay? So, one person here has used Bt spray. So, the spray is a natural spray, approved for organic agriculture. You spray it, it basically is soil bacteria, the spores and the bacteria added together in a spray form. You spray it on the crop and it kills certain insects. It breaks open their stomachs, breaks little holes in the cell walls. Now, the biotech engineers take the gene from the bacterium, insert it into the DNA of corn and cotton plants, and every single cell of every single genetically modified Bt corn or Bt cotton plant has a gene-sized spray bottle. Now, when you used Bt spray, was it in a can or in a big spray tank? All right, so it was in a can. And when you looked at the can, did it say use as a mouthwash or gargle? Did it say take internally and enjoy? No. It says if you consume, consult the Poison Control Center. So why are they putting this toxin into our food? Now I'm going to talk about the worst part of Bt toxin later. I just want to talk about the allergic reactions associated with Bt toxin. They fed Bt toxin to mice, and the mice had an allergic or immune system reaction to the Bt toxin, and also became sensitized and had a reaction to other compounds that were formerly harmless. It was as potent as cholera toxin. Local and systemic immune system response. Humans exposed to the Bt toxin, this is the spray form. This is not the Bt in the corn. This is the spray form. Exposed to the spray, developed antibody responses, IgE, IgG. People who got sprayed with Bt in the Northwest, when it was being sprayed for gypsy molds, about 500 people reported allergic and flu-like symptoms. Some had to go to the hospital. So why does the EPA say that Bt has a history of safe use and is completely benign and has no effects on humans or animals? Larry, any ideas? You used to work at the EPA. You think they're influenced by the manufacturers. I agree. I agree. And so if you look at the Bt toxin that's produced in the corn, it's thousands of times more concentrated. It has properties of a known allergen. So the World Health Organization says, we recommend that if there's any amino acid sequences that are similar to known allergens, don't use it. Don't use it. If they have proteins, if they resist digestion in heat, if they resist breakdown through digestive enzymes, don't use it. Or at least study it in detail. Well, the Bt toxin has properties of known allergens. It has the amino acid sequence. It's heat resistant. It's digestive resistant. It fails the WHO criteria, and yet it's in our food supply. So we're eating a Bt toxin, which is an allergen. The Roundup Ready crops, like Roundup Ready soybeans. Here's the backstory. Monsanto found bacteria growing in a chemical waste dump near their factory and figured, great, let's put it, and it was surviving in the presence of Roundup, so they figured, great, let's put it in the food supply. So they took the gene in the bacterium that allowed it to survive the Roundup, put it into soybeans. Now you can spray all the soybeans with Roundup and not kill the soybeans, just all the other plant biodiversity. The gene that is inserted produces a protein that has properties of a dust mite allergen. It also fails the WHO criteria. But it was just a suggestion. It wasn't a absolute regulation. So if you're allergic to dust mites, you might be allergic to soy. Now the only human feeding, yeah, they're reacting to what I'm saying. The only human feeding study ever published showed that the genes from soybeans, part of it transferred into the DNA of gut bacteria. And that gut bacteria was unkillable with Roundup, suggesting that it might be functioning. Meaning that we're producing this protein continuously inside our digestive tract that has properties of a dust mite allergen. So you may be continuously triggering an allergic reaction inside you simply by eating soy that's genetically engineered, and 94% of it is. We don't know if the Bt toxin gene transfers to gut bacteria, turning it into a living pesticide factory, because they didn't study that. They pulled the plug on the research when they found out that the genes from soybeans transfer. So that's one way that your body can develop an allergic reaction to GMOs. But there are many other ways. The process of genetic engineering, when you take the gene out of the soil bacterium and you make millions of copies and you put it into a gun and you shoot that gun into a plate of millions of cells. I'm not making this up. This is how they genetically engineer. They shoot a gun into a plate of millions of cells, hoping that some of those genes make it into the DNA of some of those cells, or they use agrobacterium to smuggle it in, and then they clone that cell into a plant. The process of insertion plus cloning creates massive collateral damage. Genes can be switched on, switched off, increase, decrease. You can have higher levels of existing allergens or new allergens. So Monsanto's Bt corn, the process of genetic engineering switched on a gene that's never on in normal corn of the same variety, and it produces gamazine, which is a known allergen. So you may be reacting to an allergen that's not found in normal corn, but it's only found in Monsanto's variety. Or you may be reacting to the up to 7-fold increase in trypsin inhibitor found in the soy that's genetically engineered compared to non-GM soy when they're cooked. 7 times. Now, trypsin inhibitor inhibits trypsin, which is a protein digester, and if you have reduction of protein digestion, then you're giving more time for protein to hang out in your digestive tract to trigger an allergic reaction. So if you're eating GM soy, you may start getting allergic to a wide variety of proteins. Soon after GM soy was introduced, for the next 5 years, peanut allergies doubled. Maybe it was the trypsin inhibitor, maybe it's the cross-reactivity between soy and peanuts that's well documented. Maybe it enhanced the cross-reactivity through these side effect activities of the genetic engineering process. Now that's just 2 ways or so, the gene that's input or the background problems. Now we'll talk about the other more dangerous aspect of Bt toxin, the way it kills insects. Remember, it pokes little holes in the cell walls, causing leakage. But the EPA says it has no impact on humans or mammals. It's destroyed in the digestive process. Well, they finally took the Bt toxin from Monsanto's corn, exposed it to human cells in a laboratory, and it poked little holes, causing leakage. And if you read the article, the authors are very clear. It appears that this is the way it also operates in insects. So if we end up with holes in our digestive tract, called leaky gut, it means that undigested food particles, plus chemicals, plus bacteria, can go through these little holes into the bloodstream where antibodies attack it as a foreign invader, which programs the immune system to create allergic or food intolerance reactions, and in some cases, autoimmune disease. And leaky gut is also linked, by the way, to cancer, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and autism. So these are ways that eating Bt corn might cause a whole host of diseases, plus the allergies. And if the gene that produces the Bt toxin transfers to your gut bacteria, then you have it continually produced inside your digestive tract, causing holes, causing inflammation, causing these gastrointestinal problems that we just heard about, plus the leaky gut, which can evoke the immune system responses. But that's not all. You have the Roundup ready crops that have Roundup, and Roundup is this broad-spectrum antibiotic, far more powerful than the antibiotics we take as pills in many cases, and it's designed, in its design, it kills, it's like the Darth Vader of antibiotics, it kills the beneficial bacteria in the gut, not the E. coli, salmonella, and botulism. So we now have a completely displaced, disorganized, messed up is the official term, gut bacteria, and the gut bacteria is part of the immune system and the digestive system. So when that's off, you may end up messing up your immune system, which might lead to more allergic reactions. And you might also end up with higher, the other thing that Bt toxin does, by the way, is it messes up the microvilli. They fed Bt toxin to mice, and they're cut by microvilli, shorter, missing pieces. So the whole digestive network, the whole mechanism is impaired. And so that's another way that the digestive capacity is reduced. Proteins can last longer, etc., etc. So you see, it's like the perfect storm. You got allergens that go in there and poke holes in human cells. And they found both Roundup and Bt toxin in the blood of pregnant women and unborn fetuses. 93% of the pregnant women tested in Canada had Bt toxin in their blood. And 80% of their unborn fetuses had the Bt toxin in their blood. They don't have a blood-brain barrier that's well developed, so now we have a toxin that drills holes in human cells in the blood of our offspring, maybe in their brains. And what do we have with children? All this attention deficit and autism, etc., that may be related. So that was just taken. That's just a few of the reasons why GMOs might produce allergies. Soon after GM soy was introduced to the UK, soy allergies skyrocketed by 50%. We have the fact that the protein that's produced may change in unpredicted ways, and that may create allergic reactions. So there's a whole bunch of technical reasons. Even the Roundup itself may provoke reactions that appear to be allergic. Any other symptoms that people noticed have improved in you as a result of switching to non-GMO foods? Someone once, a woman raised her hand and said, erectile dysfunction. So I said, okay, raise your hand if you have erectile dysfunction. Yes, you were going to say? Some of them get what? Blood in their brain. Yeah, okay. The placenta is inflamed in the mother, and that might be leading to the bleeding brain in the babies. Now, it's interesting. Roundup kills human placental cells in test tube situations. Roundup. And the Roundup also leads to birth defects at low levels. The Argentine peasants that try and stay in their homes near these Roundup-ready soybean fields have a huge incidence of birth defects and cancer linked to the exposure to Roundup and also the cocktail of pesticides that they use. One hospital had 70 times the amount of birth defects compared to the norm, treating people right near. A doctor injected Roundup into embryos of chickens and frogs and found same type of birth defects that were being reported by the Argentine peasants. And he was attacked. First he was attacked theoretically, you know, Monsanto will jump over on anything that someone says is bad about their product. Then he was physically attacked. He got into a car and they beat his car, and then his friends actually who were outside got seriously hurt. It's interesting. More what? Pomegranate juice. They're saying drink more pomegranate juice to fix the inflamed placentas in your... Okay, so I was talking... You know, it's interesting. It's a dietary intervention, which is rare anyway in the U.S. It's like, you got to hand to those guys. It's like... But the thing is, I also was sent photographs of placentas in Indonesia where they were saying that the introduction of genetically modified soy into the diets changed the... so it was deformed placentas. This was sent by a birthing clinic. And they believe it was GMOs. It's like, it's hard to say, of course, but it could be. Now, it's interesting. Any more symptoms, by the way? Yeah. Interesting. So New York Times this weekend talked about, I'm repeating it for the camera, the New York Times talked about a lot of toxic babies. You know, there was, someone showed me a graph that soon after GMOs were introduced, there was premature, the incidence of premature babies increased. I haven't had a chance to compare it to Europe, for example, or to vet it properly, but it was, you know, you could see clearly around 1997 or 8, it goes up when the consumption of GMOs went up dramatically. In fact, you can see the gastrointestinal disorders. You can see on the film Genetic Roulette, we have about 8 different graphs showing a bump up around 98 or 99 when the consumption started to get big. I mean, we talk about GMOs introduced in 96. It was a pretty small percentage, and we weren't eating it in 96 until the end of the growing season, which is just before Christmas. And so we really started consuming it in 97, but a lot more in 98 and 99, and that's when we started seeing a dramatic increase in inflammatory diseases of all types. Inflammatory diseases of the liver, of the kidneys, of the gastrointestinal systems, diabetes, which is related to inflammation, skyrocketed, and also so did severe allergic reactions that led to hospital admissions. Bipolar disorders were just announced. In the first 13 years or 16 years of GMOs went up 482%. Maybe there's a relationship there. Multiple chronic illnesses went from 7% to 13% from 96 to for the next 9 years. We have inflammatory bowel disease went up 40%. So before I go on to any more, are there any more symptoms people want to share? Because I'm going to go on to something else. Yes. 1 in 13 children have serious allergies and also low birth weight. Well, in animal studies, they fed genetically modified soybeans to mother rats starting 2 weeks before they got pregnant. And first of all, more than half of the babies died within 3 weeks compared to 10% in the controls. But the babies were also quite a bit smaller, and they couldn't reproduce. Mice fed genetically modified corn that was both Roundup Ready and Bt also had smaller babies and fewer babies. And the hamsters fed GM soy by the 3rd generation, they also had 4 or 5 times the death rate, also grew more slowly, and many had hair growing in their mouths. They also showed damage to the testicles, uterus, and ovaries, and a change in the hormonal balance, and damage to the young sperm cells. Those were all Roundup Ready crops. Now, Roundup is an endocrine disruptor, so it may be directly affecting the hormonal balance and the reproductive health of both the parents and the offspring, and it appears to be worse in future generations. Before we ask any more questions, does anyone else have a symptom? Because I want to finish that. Yes? Fast food, the fast food yes, go ahead. All right, so in your case, you're now putting it together. It's very interesting. You're now putting together that eating the fast food may have been the contributor or the cause of the unable to walk properly and the pain. Inflammation, yeah. It's interesting that some of the doctors are so confident about the GMO link. They're far more confident than I am about when the GMOs are the cause, because they get to test it on their patients. They get to tell their patients to get off of GMOs. They see an immediate change. One person told me 5,000 patients got better when she put them on non-GMO diets over these years. And she even knew how long it would take. You know, allergies and asthma, she starts to see improvements in 3 to 7 days. Mental problems almost immediately. Gastrointestinal problems take a few weeks. So she was able to see all these things. I have different doctors on the stage with me, and they're like adamant. They say, these days we're seeing complicated new diseases emerging, especially in children, and we think it's the GMOs. It fits it with the time, so there's the correlational evidence. And then there's the clinical evidence. We take them off of GMOs and they get better. So they are like far more adamant and committed to this equation. So the doctors I interview say, GMOs cause my patients to have more allergic reactions and more profound allergic reactions. That was an allergist. You know, GMOs cause inflammation. GMOs cause these things. Yeah. So interesting. So you also had problems walking, had to be on a wheelchair after splurging on your vacation with the foods you don't normally eat. It's very interesting. I know that some people tell me, and I've heard this for 10 years, when they go to Europe, they can eat foods that they can't eat here. Anyone else notice that? Okay, lots of people. All of a sudden they go to Europe and like, hey, I can have soy here, or I can have corn here, or I can just eat without having reactions. Or someone comes from Europe who lives in Europe, they come to the US, or like we just said earlier, they come from China, and they start getting allergic reactions because the food's not the same. It's different in many ways, but the most radical difference is this genetic engineering. So now, you brought up a point here that you also had to take out nuts and things. How do people avoid GMOs? Because they're not labeled, so you need a strategy. So what's one example? What do you do? Organic, I heard organic. Okay, so as an investigator trying to put this together, as soon as you say that, I go, uh-oh. Because if you buy organic has a certain percentage higher antioxidants, a certain percentage higher vitamins and minerals. It has much lower exposure to these toxic chemicals. So is it the GMO or is it the organic, other aspects of organic, other ways to avoid GMOs? Huh? Grow your own. So when you grow your own, you're eliminating all those foods that are in boxes. And when you eliminate the box foods, you eliminate the high fructose corn syrup, the soybean oil, the soy flour, all these derivatives of GMOs, which are the primary source of GMOs in our diet. And you're also eliminating the preservatives, the additives, the colorings. So there's more cofactors when you start growing your own or eliminating processed foods. Now you also may have a particular problem like nuts or gluten or dairy that you're taking out. So I just throw up my hands and say, I can't deal with it. Huh? Or the canola oil, yeah. So the issue then is it the GMO or is it something else? Now, consider this. When animals are taken off of GM soy or corn and switched to non-GM soy or corn, they get better. And there are no cofactors. No gluten-free pigs. No dairy-free cows. And one farmer switched to non-GM soy. His farmhand came to him 2 days later and said, you must have changed the feed. Farmer says, why do you say that? No more diarrhea. It had been killing the piglets. No more diarrhea. They had no more deaths from ulcers. They had no more birth defects. They had higher conception rate, higher litter size, 2/3 reduction in medicine use and antibiotics, just from switching from GM soy to non-GM soy. Pig farmer in western Iowa, medicine rate dropped dramatically. Behavior of the pigs changed. It used to be while they were on the GM diet, they were lying down all the time. You'd come into their stalls, they'd get up, they'd be lying down before you even left. Within 3 days on a non-GM corn diet, and they were still eating the GM soy because they didn't grow the non-GM soy that year, they noticed that the behavior changed. And one joked to the other, one brother joked to the other and said, hey, must be that non-GM corn. But 11 days after they switched, they were absolutely sure. Absolutely sure. Because 14 years before, the one brother that I'd been talking to was always joked about by his other brothers as having the easiest job on the farm. 3,000 piglets. Somehow it was easy to just raise the piglets in the nursery. Until 14 years ago when they introduced GM soy and corn, and then he had the hardest job on the farm, constantly injecting these animals. The behavior changed, the health changed, but what happened after 11 days? 11 days on non-GM corn, and the pigs were like they used to be. I saw the graph of the medicine use. It dropped dramatically. And there are no cofactors. So we have the American Academy of Environmental Medicine evaluated the animal feeding studies on GMOs and said these animals are afflicted with gastrointestinal problems. Sound familiar? Immune system problems. Sound familiar? Reproductive problems. Sound familiar? Organ damage, accelerated aging, dysfunctional regulation of cholesterol and insulin. So we have the same types of categories of diseases and disorders identified by the American Academy of Environmental Medicine afflicting lab animals as those getting better in humans and animals, livestock, when they take GMOs out of the diet. And if you look at the characteristics of the GMOs, you got the Roundup, which can affect the reproductive disorders. You got the gut bacteria problems with the Roundup, which can affect immune and digestion. You have the Bt, which can affect immune and digestion. So you have organ damage constantly in these experiences. People talk about kidney damage, etc., reversing in a non-GMO diet. So you have the characteristics of the GMOs, which would be predisposed to creating these same type of disorders. And these same type of disorders are on the rise in the U.S. population. So you put it all together, and you don't need more information in order to protect yourself. You don't need to wait to the human clinical trials, which they'll never do. You don't need to wait in order to take the steps to protect yourself, and especially the children who are most at risk. And there are thousands of doctors prescribing non-GMO diets today. Thousands of them. And many report people getting better. So now, let's talk about some good news before we finish up and take Q&A. So I'm going to ask you another question. How many of you, based on today's discussion, have decided to be far more vigilant at avoiding GMOs than you have been? Raise your hand. Okay. I hardly see anyone not raising their hand. This is for the camera. Now, that's not just good news. That's great news. And let me put the context of why that's such great news. The biotech industry projected in January 1999 a 95% replacement of all commercial seeds in the world within 5 years. They were planning to replace nature, eliminate the products of the billions of years of evolution, and permanently change the face of nature with designer genes, designer crops, designed for their control and their profit, and to sell their associated chemicals. 3 weeks later, that changed. The gag order was lifted on a scientist, an insider who had discovered that GMOs were dangerous. It's written in my book, Seeds of Deception, if you want to know the details. Within a month, more than 700 articles on GMOs appeared in the UK alone. And 10 weeks after the gag order was lifted, the tipping point of consumer rejection kicked GMOs out of Europe. Not the politicians, but Nestle's, Unilever, McDonald's, Burger King, Walmart, all the same companies that sell us GMOs here. Because they had the education by the media and we didn't. Consumers did that. And it was from the media, projecting and presenting the risks. People didn't want to touch it. The food companies realized it had become a marketing liability in just 10 weeks. We saw the elimination of bovine growth hormone. Monsanto's introduced genetically engineered cow drug. They call it crack for cows. Former Monsanto scientist told me 3 of his colleagues saw so much cancer-promoting hormone in the milk from treated cows, they refused to drink milk thereafter unless it was organic. One bought his own cow. So it's banned in most countries, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Europe. Now it's banned in Walmart's milk. Okay, let's try it. There we go. It's banned in most dairies now because of an education program and because of a tipping point. It was described by the media as a tipping point. How many people does it take to create a tipping point on GMOs in the US? It's not a vote. But Kraft does not have to see a 51% drop in market share to say, I think we should remove GMOs. If they see any drop in market share whatsoever that they can attribute to growing anti-GMO sentiment, they're not going to hold on to it for the group that really wants to eat their daily dose of BT and Roundup. Anyone? No one wants to eat GMOs. There's no consumer benefits. 53% of Americans say that they would avoid GMOs if labeled. So, we are seeing the early signs of a tipping point. Because we now know for sure, all of us in the room know for sure that we have the talking points to change people's diet. And what are those? The truth. You tell people the truth. Monsanto is an expert at the opposite, at deception. One of the biggest deceptions, of course, was the approval of GMOs. The FDA does not approve GMOs. They have a policy that says Monsanto, who told us that PCBs, Agent Orange, and DDT were safe, they got that wrong, but they're not going to get this wrong. They are empowered to determine if their own GMOs are safe, and they can put it on the market without telling the FDA or consumers. Because, according to this policy released in 1992, we're not aware of any information showing that GMOs are different. Therefore, no testing or labeling necessary. No testing or labeling necessary. FDA, and the person in charge of policy at the FDA was Michael Taylor, Monsanto's former attorney, who became Monsanto's chief lobbyist and vice president, who's now back at the FDA as U.S. food safety czar. So we fortunately, and this is really fortunate, that GMOs are based in food, and it's not some global warming issue that is required for policy change, for the major change. We don't require policy change. There was no law in Europe saying GMOs will not be served in McDonald's. It was McDonald's marketing people that kicked GMOs out of McDonald's. We need only about 5% of U.S. shoppers avoiding brands that contain GM ingredients to have the marketing power to demonstrate a drop in market share, to show the companies that it's become a marketing liability so that they kick it out of the United States like they've already kicked it out of Europe and Japan. So, how do we get 5% of U.S. shoppers avoiding GMOs? Well, first of all, you already know we have the talking points. Who do we go for? We go for the low-hanging non-GMO fruit. We go for health-conscious shoppers, those that already buy based on their list. 28 million Americans already buy organic on a regular basis. What's 5%? We only need 15 million Americans. So we know where the health-conscious shoppers are. We know what they read. That's one demographic. What about moms? Moms. You just give them the information and you get the heck out of the way. What about healthcare providers? We already know that the practitioners are prescribing non-GMO diets as soon as they see this talk. As soon as they see this talk. In the movie, Genetic Roulette, The Gamble of Our Lives, there's a bonus disc, a 42-minute talk I gave to Andrew Weil's Integrative Medicine Conference. The 800 or 900 practitioners were ready to prescribe a non-GMO diet on the spot. Patient groups, those suffering from irritable bowel, allergies, asthma, infertility, gluten sensitivity, autism, etc., they are looking for a solution, and we know that large populations of these sufferers have found it by eliminating GMOs. Then there's the religious groups that think GMO means God move over. And you just have to tell them about the fact that they've taken a spider gene and put it into a goat so that they can milk the goat to get spiderweb protein to make bulletproof vests, and they realize, I don't think so. So, we have the information, we have the strategy, and it's working. Non-GMO labeled products were the fastest growing subset of food sold in grocery stores in 2012. It increased 26% to 3.5 billion. In fact, the head of Whole Foods said when a product becomes third-party verified as non-GMO, it increases its sales by 15 to 30%. You know who's listening to that. All the food company. You know, we have had 26 labeling bills introduced. No, 26 states have introduced labeling bills in the United States in the last 12 months. That's a result of the rise of collective awareness of the dangers of GMOs. We have millions of people seeking non-GMO diets. We have a website, non-GMOshoppingguide.com, with about 10,000 products verified as non-GMO. An iPhone application free called Shop No GMO. Same 10,000 products. About 1 million people consult it. We don't need to wait for labeling. We can handle it with the voluntary labeling, and we can drive GMOs out of the market. We know that some conventional brands right now are removing GMOs. We expect to hear that soon, and that will inform the rest of the food industry that it's time. However, it's also the time to speed up and expand the information spreading, to expand the outreach. Because now is the time when people are most receptive to the information and need to be informed. 10 years ago, it was so hard to make that transition for people to avoid GMOs. Now it is so easy that I've tested audiences, asking them to rate themselves from 1 to 100, how vigilant they've been at avoiding GMOs before the lecture, and how vigilant they plan to be after the lecture. The lecture can be as little as 3.5 minutes, and the audience moves over. We have the movie, Genetic Roulette, The Gamble of Our Lives. We tested it at the Sun Valley Film Festival. Rate yourself how vigilant you're avoiding GMOs. Take out the top 20% who are already converted, average of 41. At the end of the hour-and-a-half video, 91. And the same group rated themselves as a 28 in terms of how active they've been at educating people. That moved up to 77. So the same information that changes people's diet makes the information go viral. Now, I can tell that you guys are the converted. You are the choir, large part. Not everyone in the beginning, but I think now you are. People may say to me, oh, you're just speaking to the choir. I say, no. We are arming the choir. We are giving the choir the information that they need to protect themselves, to protect their families, and to help spread the message. We have some books and DVDs at the back, and also online at seedsofdeception.com. And the movie's available at geneticroulettemovie.com. And I would encourage you to create a lending library and sign up for our Spilling the Beans newsletter. Do we have the sign-up sheet somewhere? We can start passing that around. And during the Q&A, people can sign up for the newsletter. Be a click and send revolutionary. Share the information. If you want to join a local group, go online and join the Tipping Point Network of local activists in areas around the country. We've got about 9,000. If you want to become a GMO speaker, we have a speaker training all online. We've taught about 900. And if you want to simply avoid GMOs, go to non-GMOshoppingguide.com and consult with it and figure out your new brand choices. And then let the people know who you love about what you learned here today. This is an opportunity that has never come around before in human history. We have never seen a threat like this with the self-propagating genetic pollution that can affect all those who eat. And I just checked earlier, and you all do. It affects all living beings because they're released outdoors, and it affects all future generations because it is unrecallable from the gene pool. It is a self-propagating genetic pollution. As long as corn exists, then Bt corn will exist in at least some level of contamination, unless we come up with some science fiction future to clean it up. No one in the past has introduced a technology that had such long-term and widespread negative consequences as to affect all living beings and all future generations. Which means we have an unprecedented opportunity that our grandparents never had, and that is to protect all living beings and all future generations. And I have to tell you this from the bottom of my heart, from my experience and the experience of anti-GMO and non-GMO activists around the country and around the world. When you take steps to support and to celebrate all living beings and all future generations, you will find that they support and celebrate you, so that they're waiting. Thank you.